Hi everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Kai and co-host for today's session, which will be on multi-line tactile braille displays. We have three awesome speakers who will be giving a brief introduction on the products that they'll be representing. It'll be back-to-back 7-minute discussion, and then we'll just open it up for anybody who wants to ask any questions to all three. So Gonna start with Ed Rogers. Ed is the managing director, founder of Bristol Braille, leading team behind the Canute 360, the world's first affordable multi-line Braille display. Through Bristol Braille's nonprofit work, he focuses on advancing literacy, independence, and access to information for blind people worldwide. So, Ed, thanks for being here and feel free to take it away.
Thank you very much. Yes, Bristol Braille Technology is a not-for-profit company operating from Bristol in the United Kingdom. And we were founded in 2011, but that was actually a continuation of an earlier project to build single-line Braille displays. We pivoted to multi-line Braille displays in 2012 and spent a long time developing what became the Canute 360. And our MO is quite unusual. We are a significantly smaller company than I believe any other manufacturer today, and certainly than the other ones who are manufacturing at any scale. And we have focused all our development efforts on arranging meetings, either one-to-one with our customers that make a specific request of us, which then drives the development of what applications we add or what hardware features we add, or through meetups, which we do around the year. So that resulted in the end of 2019 in the Canute 360. The Canute 360 was and is a 360 cell Braille display which uses our own display technology. When we launched, it was £1,800. It's now £2,500. That pounds sterling, but I will come up with some translations for us later. And then from that we then built out. I will come a little bit more onto the technology if that interests everyone, but I'm happy to talk relatively freely about how the actual mechanism operates. But suffice to say here that it uses no pins and it refreshes one line at a time. And by doing that, that was why we were able to get the price down. So it was approximately 1/9 per cell, what you would expect from a Braille display. We built on top of that display a two-part device called the Canute console, which we released in 2023. The Canute console added a monitor, a visual monitor, which was synchronized to the Braille display, both horizontally and vertically. So you had the same layout and the same 40 columns by 9 lines of text, whether you're looking at the high contrast black on white visuals or the Braille display. And it adds a pull-out keyboard. The difference is that the Canute 3 was essentially an ebook reader, whereas the Canute console was and is a device primarily intended for promoting computer science opportunities for people who are Braille readers and want to use the power of Braille, the ability to create spatial diagrams and to simply be able to read from one end of a function to another end of the function without having to pan backwards and forwards, up and down, and so on, to improve their opportunities in computer science in particular. Especially last year, we ended up expanding. We'd done enough work on the Canute Scientific, so the Canute console, and we ended up expanding the feature set to go quite far beyond computer science. And they started introducing applications where you could very quickly build any application yourself without very much knowledge of computing, which will use charts, grids, and we, as demonstrations, we built trading applications there for looking at stocks and shares. We've built weather applications. We've built navigational ones. These are experimental and ones that have been rolled out. A transport diagram, a schematic circuit diagram viewer. The focus, as you can tell, is becoming very much on technical subjects, the ability to enable someone to use 40 cells of Braille, which is in our view, an important width, because you can view a full Braille document and you can get proper columns from a table, and you can really have a more spacious diagram. And to use the power of that to pursue career opportunities and educational opportunities that they may otherwise feel had a very particular technological barrier. So we aren't really building something in the Canute console which is designed for mass use in classrooms to be rolled out to everyone is using the same syllabus. It's designed as a tool where if there is a person, whether they are employed, unemployed, but looking for opportunities and looking to pursue their own career development, or they're in education, to be able to take an enthusiasm and to build their own applications or to look at existing applications and to develop a new skill set. And we've had quite a lot of success for that. We are now about to launch a new product, which we have not yet formally launched. So I can't go into full detail, but the short version of it is it is still a 360 cell Braille display. It uses the same display technology. It runs in much the same way as the Canute console, but we have a much clearer focus on scientific and technical subjects. And we're driving very hard towards building a device with the users we currently have and with new users who are waiting to pick up this device, who have been contacting us, to make a device which enables scientific workflows, data analyst workflows, engineering workflows, including flow diagrams for circuitry, for network diagrams, and so on. And the real difference, because of a project we're doing with a UK organization called Material Focus, is going to be in the hardware. So the software is a development of the Canute console, a heavy focus on career advancement, the opportunity to earn more or learn more. Whereas what's going to change in the hardware is this is going to be a highly ruggedized, modular, repairable Braille display, which will have up to 12 years of warranty, where the user is enabled to repair it themselves under warranty, assuming they go through certain processes to learn the process, do it safely, where the internals can be upgraded in the field, where repairs can be done in the field without being sent back. And we will be integrating or selling it with an optional battery, which some people who've used Canutes have always asked us for. This is playing to our strengths. The differences that are worth pointing out between what we do and what other Braille displays do is, one, I've already touched upon the nature of the Braille display itself. I think I'm running a little low on time, so I'll keep this bit pretty brief, and then we can do the rest in conversation. But there is Braille spacing in our display, so we don't have even vertical spacing. All our diagrams are based on Braille. We don't do dotty lines. If we want to see the relative position of different nodes, we use a character to define one node, another character to define another, and you roll over that character with your cursor to learn more about it in a context pull-up in Braille, of course. And it's a technology which is rather robust. You can't compress the Braille. You don't need to touch it through a membrane or something like that. And it can, with our newly released model, can be repaired, like I said, in the field using relatively straightforward techniques. So that's the direction we're going in. And that's because we want to be able to support our users to use our devices for a long time. We're basically just rather fond of the devices, and we really like getting them back and seeing someone's machine being repaired for this, keep it running for another 6 years. So that's our new business model. The pricing of the Canute starts at £2,500. I will give some exchanges when we get to that, and goes up to £5,000 for premium models with all the extras and so on and so forth.
That's awesome. Thanks, Ed. That's super exciting. And I have a ton of questions about the upcoming product. So, next, let's move on to Jennifer Wenzel, who is a technology product specialist at American Printing House for the Blind. Jennifer supports educators and students using Braille technology tools such as the Mantis, Chameleon, and the Monarch. And she does this work through demonstrations, workshops, and conferences and presentations. And today she'll be talking to us about the Monarch. So, Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you. So I am a technology product specialist for American Printing House for the Blind. We've been around for quite a while, mostly in the education space. I think that APH was founded in like the 1850s to produce Braille textbooks and still do that, but have recently partnered with other companies to produce some tech products, which is very exciting. So the Monarch, we have partnered with Humanware and the National Federation of the Blind to develop the Monarch. And we also have dot cells, so it's a great partnership, collaboration with everyone. So I'm really excited that we live in a world where there are choices in multi-line Braille. This is so exciting for me. I grew up using an old Versa Braille and have used, multi-line or used single line displays for quite a while. And having choices in our multi-line Braille arena that can do different things is really an exciting time that we live in. And I keep saying the word exciting because I can't think of another good word, but sorry. Anyway, the Monarch is a 10-line, 32-cell multi-line Braille display. It can also produce tactile graphics, and one exciting thing is that tactile graphics can have Braille labels. You do feel actual lines, outlines, and you can have Braille within them. When someone has a Monarch, they have the ability to access what's called the Tactile Graphic Image Library from APH, and this is something online. It's a database of quite a few tactile images, over 1,500 tactile images, and it's always being expanded and updated. And you can save those images in internal storage of your own Monarch or on a flash drive for use offline. You can also access tactile graphics through opening a PDF, JPG, or JSG file. So people can create them, you can create them, you can use Tactile View software to create them. You can also use CorelDRAW or other ways to create them. You can also even go to like ChatGPT and ask it to create an image of something. Usually simple outlines work well, but that's another way to access graphics. There's also an app called Wing It, which has an accompanying iOS app. And when the Monarch and the iOS device are connected via Bluetooth through the app, anyone, a blind person or a sighted person, can draw on the app and the drawing appears raised on the Monarch. And one really great thing about this is that there is a tool called Braille. This brings up a keyboard, and anyone, they do not need to know Braille, they can type this on a keyboard, can type Braille labels for parts of the diagram, and it will appear in the person's preferred Braille type. So if you want Unified English Braille Grade 2 or British Braille or whatever Braille table you are using, you can experience those labels on a drawing in your Braille from anyone or from yourself. You can also label it on the Monarch side in your type of Braille. So those are some ways to access tactile graphics, which is very exciting. It can definitely help in a lot of arenas, work and school. The Monarch also features a Perkins Braille style keyboard, and there is a small action button between dots 1 and 4 on the keyboard, and this gives a way to route your cursor. So when you're editing documents, maybe you're writing a long document in Word and you need to move your cursor quickly, you can point to a spot and double tap this action button and that will actually route your cursor. That also works for selecting items. So when you're in the menu or you're in a list of your email messages, you can select those things with that point and click gesture. So it does have an onboard email app where you can connect your accounts. Also, due to a recent update, you are able to connect to Google Drive or OneDrive accounts and access files and save files in those accounts. There's also a book reader. You can connect your Monarch online and download books from libraries such as Bookshare, Project Gutenberg, Sella, lots of other European type libraries. There's a whole list of libraries that you can download books from, or you can import a BRF or EPUB file from elsewhere, like you can get it from on a USB drive and import it into the book reader. So there are a lot of onboard apps, and these apps are always growing. The apps provided, the Monarch is based on an Android operating system, so there is an SDK, and we're continuing to develop new apps. And eventually this SDK will be released so that others can develop apps. So it's a very dynamic system. It's always growing and changing. Recently, a periodic table app was released. We're about to release an accessible game that will be fully accessible with graphics and speech. It's a mainstream game. It's a PBS Kids game, actually, called Cyber Chase Echo Explorer. So that's really exciting. And there's just a lot of potential for a lot of really great apps. I think the periodic table will really help people in science. And in that app, there's lots of ways to get different information quickly about elements, which is a great thing. And speaking of tables, the periodic table is one example of how you can experience the relationships of things in a table in rows and columns on a Monarch. The Monarch can also be connected through the Braille terminal to a computer using JAWS or NVDA, and very soon we'll be able to be connected to iOS. And one of the great things about that connection is you can experience things like the Excel spreadsheets or tables. You can actually experience the rows and the columns of tables and really use them natively. What I like too is you're able to skim. Maybe you want information, maybe you want a certain cell, you can skim and find that cell, and you can select it by quickly routing your cursor with that touch gesture. So that works slightly differently. There's only a single tap instead of the double tap when you're using JAWS, and I believe NVDA as well. I haven't used NVDA as much, but so it's great to experience those tables and spreadsheets more natively and really be able to tell, instead of one cell at a time scrolling on a single line display, to be able to experience multiple lines of those cells. So I believe that is all that I wanted to let you know about the Monarch, and I believe I'm out of time, so I will turn it over to the next person. I'm happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our next and final presenter is Dave Williams, Customer Experience Manager at Dot Inc. and Chair of the Braillists Foundation. Dave has spent more than 25 years advancing accessibility and tactile literacy through his work in accessible technology, media, and inclusive design. And his career includes leadership roles within the RNIB and collaborations with many different organizations. So Dave is going to talk to us today about the DotPad X.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's a huge pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much, Kai, Abby, Danielle, and everybody at the Tactile Media Alliance who have brought this session to us, and I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you today. I'm not going to be showing any slides, but I will at some point be waving the DotPad around in front of my camera, and I will talk with you a bit more about that. I just want to start, though, by agreeing with Jennifer from APH that it is just unbelievable, really, that we now live in a world where we have choice, where multi-line Braille technology is concerned. It's not something any of us really imagined. It was something we kind of hoped and dreamed might be the case one day, but I grew up with hard copy Braille at a specialist school for the blind. There was very little Braille in my life outside of that environment. Eventually, when I got into the workplace, I got access to a single line Braille display. And to be honest with you, even though now I am a strong advocate for Braille, I didn't love Braille growing up. I thought it was othering and kind of weird and old fashioned. And it was only when I became a dad and wanted to read the bedtime story that I recognized the value of Braille for finding our own voice and independence, and all the reasons that you guys already know why Braille is important. And so I, with Ed Rogers and a number of other interested parties in the UK, we established the Braillists Foundation formally at the start of 2020. Very quickly, the pandemic came along and we realized that that wasn't the optimal time for a tactile literacy organization, so we pivoted online. And so the mission of the Braillists Foundation is simply more Braille, to spread Braille and tactile literacy, and we do that through our online events, and you can find out more about that on the Braillists website. But you want to hear about multi-line, and you want to hear about my work with Dot. I joined the team at Dot around about a year ago, but I didn't realize Dot's been in existence for about 10 years. And Dot was established really to try and find a new Braille technology that would allow us to render multi-line Braille and tactile graphics on a single device using a lower cost, a more lightweight Braille cell. When you put your finger on a piezoelectric cell, it's kind of like when you put your finger on a piano key, you're feeling the end of quite a long component that extends inside the machine. And so the innovation that Dot came up with was a compact electromagnetic Braille cell that can be stacked both vertically and horizontally in any configuration. And these cells are reproducible at scale, and actually the more you produce, the more it pushes the cost down. And so those of you who have been following the Dot journey for a while may remember Dot's first product, which was the Dot Watch, a wearable 4-cell Braille device. Dot, from that product, learned a lot about Braille technology, what works, what doesn't work, and the fact that we all know that eventually dust and dirt and grease and moisture ingress inside Braille's displays, and that's the most common cause of failure. So Dot took the quite bold decision to introduce a cell protector, and that's what you find on the Monarch. It's also what you find on the Dot Pad, which I'm holding up now. And this has led to previously unprecedented levels of reliability where Braille technology is concerned. And you can ask APH, like, how many Monarchs have they had back with faulty cells? It's a very, very small number, because having this simple cell protective sheet over the pins means that the cells are really well protected, which of course is important when you want to use these devices out on the road or in a classroom or workplace or wherever. Dot Pad is a 320 cell display, weighs around 2.5 pounds, measures 9 by 11 inches, is designed to be carried in a backpack or a school bag, and can show up to 10 lines of Braille on the multi-line display. The pins are evenly distributed, so we can accurately render tactile graphics. And then in addition to the 300 cell tactile graphics display, we also have a 20 cell Braille reading line, which respects the original cell spacing. So actually you kind of get the best of both worlds, because you've got that uniform distribution of pins for tactile graphics or multi-line Braille. But then if you are a purist and you want that correct Braille cell spacing, then you can get that from the 20 cell Braille reading line. The reading line is also used for describing images. So if you're using an app or a screen reader that renders a tactile graphic, often you'll get the name of that graphic, the description, the alt tag, the description on the reading line. Also on the top surface, we've got 6 navigation keys for panning around, and then there's USB and Bluetooth connectivity. DotPad is a display, not a tablet, so it's really important to make that distinction. I'm sure Jennifer will agree that one of the most common questions that comes up is, actually, even though Dot supplies the cells to the Monarch, what's the difference between those products? And they're very, very different products. So the Monarch is a computer, essentially. It's a tablet, has its own software built in. You heard Jennifer talking about, the tactile graphics image library from APH and things like that you can access directly on device. Whereas the DotPad display is designed to work with your existing smart device. So if you have an iPhone, for example, or an iPad running anything from iOS 15.3 and later, then you can connect DotPad in the same way that you connect other Braille displays through accessibility voice over Braille. There's also support for DotPad in JAWS for Windows, introduced in September of last year. And there is DotPad support in NVDA from 25.1 and later. On iOS, which is what I'm using just now, I have DotPad connected and we're on the home screen, and I'm currently focused on the health icon. And so I can feel the shape of that icon on DotPad. There's a kind of a heart shape with a box around it. And then on the single line display is the word health. And then if I pan forward, I then get the next icon on my home screen, which is the home app, and that's represented by a tactile of a little house. And I can keep on going, and I get the wallet, which is represented by a wallet. So you can have that kind of multimodal sort of experience of tactile graphics and Braille. And in the case of Dot Canvas, which is our drawing and library app for tactile graphics, it's a free app that you can download to iOS, or you can use it in the web browser. Canvas will allow you to add audio tags as well. So if you're experiencing a tactile graphic, we've all had that experience where you have to drag your hands away to go and look at the key or something like that to understand what's being represented. And so having the audio at the same time of feeling the tactile graphic is a very powerful combination. I just want to talk briefly about JAWS for Windows and the support for DotPad there, because what you get in JAWS are a number of modes, the two most important of which are wrapped and cropped. So wrapped makes most efficient use of the available Braille real estate. So if you're looking at an email or a document or a web page, as much text as possible will be displayed on your dot pad. However, if you go into a table or a spreadsheet, JAWS uses cropped mode, and that attempts to preserve the physical layout of the screen so that you can understand the spatial relationship between different pieces of content. Often the question comes up, what is the point in multi-line Braille? And in a word, it's context. It's understanding the context of how information relates to each other. If you're a coder, for example, spacing can be very important in certain programming languages. So using the JAWS cropped mode will preserve that physical layout. I'm just looking at the time, and obviously we've got questions. And actually, before the session, Danielle sent some questions round for us to think about. I'm very happy to address some of those. There was a question about resources that help kind of inform our practice. And so with the work that we do at DOT, collaboration is hugely important. We work very closely, as you've heard, with APH and with Humanware, and also a number of other organisations. We're working with big tech on AI solutions to try and speed up the process of remediating images to make them make more sense in the tactile domain. Obviously, I've mentioned the Braillists. You can find recordings of many of our masterclasses on the Braillists website and also through the Braillecast podcast. Also, the Braillists is part of a campaign that launched this year with ICVI and the World Blind Union, which is the Global Braille Literacy Campaign. And if you're not aware of that, I urge you to check it out. The DAISY Consortium, of course, is leading with APH on the development of the new eBraille standard. So that's an important initiative to help with improving the reflowing of Braille. So often the problem you get when you take a BRF and try and put it on your Braille display is that you get that short line, long line problem. And so this becomes more apparent on multi-line displays. So eBraille can be very important for improving the reflowing, navigation and integration of Braille with tactile graphics. And then also I want to a couple of shout outs actually to Marco and Kai, who have been doing some magnificent work when it comes to tactile media. BlindSVG.com is well worth your time and attention if you've not been there. The TADA tactile curriculum. And there are many, many more resources that I could mention, but I hope that's useful. And I really think that groups like this one, the Tactile Media Alliance, are so important in bringing us together as a sector, because we are widely dispersed, we are thinly spread, and it is important that we do have fora where we can come together and collaborate and share expertise. So that's a bit about DotPad and a bit about some of my involvement in this sector, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you again, everyone, for the presentations. So we're going to open it up for anybody who wishes to ask a question, whether that's in the chat or just unmuting. But I'm just going to kick us off with a couple of questions that I have. I think one of the things that really jumped out at me in terms of the different products and the different features is that they're all very unique and they all provide different supports in different areas, whether that's in STEM and in education. And so my curiosity is the design and how that shapes these different products. Because Ed, I know you talk about how you're using more symbolic representations of symbols to be able to represent diagrams, and whereas more with the dot pad and the Monarch, it's outlines of objects and 2D representations of them. So where do these different techniques and approaches in tactile graphics and designing them and the way that the devices are designed around that, how does it all kind of fit together? And do we really need different types of representations?
Who of us should take that, do you think?
I'm happy for anybody to, but
Shall I
you're certainly welcome to start.
There are, of course, space for lots of different representations, and I think it's worth saying that when of course, everyone here will understand this, but it's worth reiterating that when you're talking about Braille, you are talking about something which works in the same way and representing the same information as its print equivalent. Whereas tactile graphics doesn't do the same thing in the same way as visual graphics, and there's so many different forms that tactile graphics can take. And in a sense, it can blur between what we really describe in many ways as being spatial Braille as opposed to tactile graphics. So you can represent a floor plan by trying to draw the corners of the room, or you can represent a floor plan by having different codes showing the different connecting the different connecting doors and another. So say an A representing one door, a B representing another, and CD representing certain assets that within those places, and then you roll over them to discover what they are. You will want to use different things for different purposes. So what our approach lends itself towards is spatially arranged data. So tables are hugely important. Flow diagrams are hugely important. The actual lines connecting something in a flow diagram is a symbolic representation of some data which could easily be represented in another way. We do it by having spatially arranged Braille characters. So in our case, it has led us to our focus on science and technology has led us towards this iconographic approach, where the real focus is not on creating something which feels accurate to the visuals, but which is a useful representation of the underlying data. And therefore, of course, we focus on textual and pneumatic data. We don't put any of our effort into representing bitmap graphics, which is something that the evenly spaced designs of Dot and Monarch do, and we're not attempting to do bitmap graphics. So if you have a bitmap like that, we don't do that. So for example, SVGs can be used sometimes in order to represent a very visual image. Canute would be a poor choice of device to view that, but SVGs are also used to represent SVGs, circuit diagrams, and so on. And we have applications where the user can do that. More importantly, though, we have open sourced everything. The whole thing is running open source. It's an open source system. We're open sourcing the schematics this year for the actual hardware. Our big focus is on letting the users have access to the underlying code. They then contribute, and that then goes out to all our other users.
Great. Anybody else?
Some of the work we're doing at Dot with AI, and we've got some questions, by the way, from Marco in the chat, so I think we probably want to come to those as well in a little while. But just on that first question about, influencing the design. So obviously, as I mentioned in the presentation, the DotPad kind of has, both kind of Braille spacing and equidistant pins for, tactile graphics or Braille. I suppose something that we can all probably agree on is that actually your sense of touch is fundamentally different from how something looks visually, right? So, if you want to represent, I don't know, the Washington Monument in a tactile domain, it's not going to be the same as, seeing the sunset, and all the different colors and the sky and the clouds and all the rest of it. That actually, if you want to make that a meaningful tactile experience, it might be helpful to ask the question, well, what story do you want to tell with this image, right? And then decide which elements and components are important to convey in the tactile domain, and then use the standards, published by Banner or whoever, to try and build your tactile image. And so that's one of the approaches that we're actively exploring. Dot.
And I don't have much to add except to say that I think we're just starting to learn about all the different ways that people can experience and be literate with tactile images. And I think that a lot might change in the next few years. And, to Dave's point, it's true. Well, and to Ed's point, there's a space for probably different types of representations depending what you're trying to do. That's sort of that story you're telling or what information you're getting. And I know there has been sort of a trend to try to produce as much of the visual, like to make it accurate visually, but that can't totally be done. And the more clutter or the more information that's in the graphic, it becomes more confusing to people and not as useful. So I think that there's going to be a lot of development around these concepts coming up, and I know that APH is always looking, and HumanWare are looking at those trends and what can be done to produce images better. And also, I know that we're working on some updates to our graphics experience that will also include some descriptions, some like audio and Braille overlays to give more information about the images. So I think again, it's such a great time, with different tactile experiences, and it will be just something that will continue to develop and evolve.
Awesome. So let's see.
Ellison had a question, possibly.
Yeah,
Oh,
yes.
I didn't know it was the right time to ask questions, so that's why I lowered my hand.
Yeah, feel free to go ahead. And I think Marco had some questions in the chat, and we'll
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
get to his as well after.
Yeah, he should go first.
Oh, okay, sure. So Marco says for all the presenters, one, I've heard a lot about iOS connectivity, but how about connecting to Mac OS? I urge you to not leave Mac voiceover users out. And then second question, well, I think he has three questions, so let's just take each of them one at a time.
I'll
So
speak to this a
yeah,
little bit, if that's okay. This is Dave.
sure.
So on the Mac, you're absolutely right, Marco. We do need to see more progress there. My understanding at the moment is that we only get single line Braille from Mac OS, but we're definitely flagging this issue. It does require work on Apple's side to make that happen. And so I would urge everybody who feels strongly about this issue to just keep emailing accessibility@apple.com if you haven't already. And if you have already, like, maybe check in with them to see, how it's going. I think, Apple will prioritize a bit on, demand. And so if they feel like there's a need for this, or this is important, then that might help elevate it or escalate it. So definitely agree with the sentiment and hope that they can make some work.
I'll add something at that, if that's okay. I would also love
Sure.
to have support for voiceover, but don't. But we do have some multi-line support for Canute on the Mac if you are happy using BRLTTY, which is a screen reader from the terminal, which is supported in Mac, Windows, and Linux. We use that natively on the device, but you can also run it remotely. That's for those who are happy in the terminal. It's not quite what the question was about, but BRLTTY is interesting. Is an interesting screen reader to explore.
This is Marco. Really quick about BRLTTY. Does your display also support TDSR? I just gave a presentation on introducing people to terminal yesterday, so I haven't heard of this one. It's interesting.
On TDSR, sorry, you're going to have to help me.
2-day screen reader. TDSR was written by a guy at the Lighthouse in SF, and it's something you can install that runs on Python right in terminal, and it's a terminal-based screen reader that allows you to have some navigational movement that's better than voiceover when you're in terminal. So,
well, I don't think it does unless he's implemented the driver from BRLTTY in the process, but it would be very interesting to do. We're big fans of terminal, of driving a display from the terminal. It's all been open sourced, of course, the driver for everything for BRLTTY. I'll look into that.
Right.
How do you spell that again, please?
TDSR, Tango Delta Sierra Romeo.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Ben, did you have anything to add?
No, just that no one wants to leave the Mac OS out, and it's definitely seconding what Dave said to let Apple know, and this is definitely something that Apple will hopefully be working on, and we are encouraging them to work on as well.
Great. So Marco also asks how about implementation for dot heights in displays? This would really be helpful in presentations of complex tactile images. Anybody want to take that on?
I believe still being left entirely on the Orbit Graffiti, as far as I know. We are not implementing different dot heights. The dot height on a Canute display is quite proud. It's 0.4 millimeters, which is significantly prouder than the average Braille dot, if you like. You can at least put different covers over it in order to reduce the height if you want to, and we can increase the height by demand, but that's not really the question you're asking.
So Orbit Research have developed a product with multi-height pins, the Graffiti. I'm unclear about the current status of that. I was kind of hoping somebody from Orbit might join on this session. Certainly, I think it's on our radar at DOT. The priority initially was to improve the speed of the refresh. That was something that everybody seemed quite strongly wanting. You know, when something changes on screen, I want to know about that straight away on my display. And so we did that in the third generation cell. The next thing is to increase the force with which the pin rises. Right now, if you press down on the pin, it doesn't resist your finger. As soon as you move your finger, of course, it comes up, so it's fine for reading Braille. But if you wanted to monitor a clock or a blinking cursor or something like that, you know, we definitely know that there is some room for improvement there. And then a lot of people ask about things like touch sensitivity as well. So it's definitely on the radar, and I think we all, you know, appreciate the benefit of, because then you can have contours and textures and all kinds of fun things. And we are quite early on this journey, but I think we will get there, but it's not going to be for a little while.
And I would agree with the Monarch. We do have a way you can adjust what we call the detail level. So like the thickness, which I know isn't exactly what you're asking. It's different than the height, but you can adjust a bit with the thickness and thinness, I guess, of lines. But that's, you know, it's always on the radar to try to make the graphics experience better.
And Marco's last question was about support for SVG, scalable vector graphics, and what that status is for different products.
So I mentioned this in my initially, although I think it might be when I was being cut off, so I'll go briefly through it. We support SVG for a couple of different applications, but bear in mind that they are for doing very different things. So SVG as a format is used for many different applications. So we have a flow diagram viewer which can support SVGs. We have a prototype version of a computer-aided design viewer for looking at CAD files which can support SVGs. But some of these are under development, and none of it is meant to be universal. SVG format being something a bit like CSV, comma separated values, where it's used for many different things. We do support DOT format, the unironically named DOT format, which is a graph viewer format, which is the most common standard for showing relationship nodes, does a very similar thing to SVG, and is very useful for drawing diagrammatic graphs. It's all open sourced, by the way, if anyone wants to join us. If we haven't yet publicized it, then we can do on demand.
So, Marco, since I first learned about your work, Blind SVG, I've been absolutely flying the flag for this at DOT, and I would describe it as imminent. So hopefully we'll have something to show you at CSUM. But yeah, we're definitely done at least one round of development on this, and there's probably more work to do. But it's absolutely coming, I would say, weeks.
And I just checked because I did not know the answer, and I am told that right now with the Monarch, it's a limitation in Android that's being addressed, and it may be something that we work with an open source browser to work on.
Awesome.
This is Marco. Thank you all. Sorry to drop all those on you.
Keep them coming, Marco. Keep them coming. We absolutely need to hear from people like yourself who are pioneering in this area.
Awesome. And I'm glad to hear that it's imminent. That's great. I can't wait to see it. Thank you.
All right. I think Taliesin had a question.
Yeah. So one thing that Jennifer said was about the detail of the graphic. I think that's an interesting thing because I work more on the description side of things in highly interactive simulations. And so getting people to understand what to describe for these complex and interactive graphics, more detail is not necessarily always the best thing to do. So I really like the way that you said that you have to think about like the story behind what is it important that you're trying to convey here that really needs to come out in whatever modality that you're using but that's not my question. That was just a comment. So my question was like, I don't know, this is my first meeting that I finally been able to make it to. So I didn't even check to see what the topic was, but when you started talking about all these tactile graphics, or Braille displays or versions of different kinds of Braille displays and Braille devices and they seem to be capable of complex graphics. And I'm just wondering if they've been tested or a refreshable Braille display seems like really useful for things like that I work on, which are these interactive visual simulations. But I'm not sure if they're totally refreshable. Anyway, so I just wanted to let people know who's working in the space about the FET interactive simulation project that makes highly interactive visualizations, but I don't know how they would work on a Braille display. But our project is also open source, and we do a lot of, well, we describe the graphics as a way for access. And we've also collaborated with the Chrome Lab on making tactile inputs or haptic output for our simulations. So there's a lot of interesting ways to, but I'm just wondering how not just a complex static graphic, but complex dynamic graphics, how they work on these devices.
Thank you. I think it would be nice to have a conversation as well after this, if that's all right. But
Yeah.
as I mentioned, when it comes to graphics, we're far more on the spatially arranged Braille that represents the same data as what a graphic might otherwise represent. But as for live data, a lot of our apps are based around APIs in the sense that you plug an API in to what is otherwise a generic chart application, and then it will turn that into a live moving chart. It doesn't move under your fingers. It waits until you refresh it or move from pan to side, because we have found that static is good until you choose otherwise. So there's no particular difference in our design philosophy of whether something is live data or not. It is essentially snapshotted every time the display is manually refreshed, or of course you can in software force it to refresh, but our design ethos is to avoid surprising people with changes until they've made a change themselves.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good ethos. I think that's sort of how we go about it too.
Yeah, and to pan stuff within the frame rather than to moving the frame around. So to change as few things as possible is what we tend to go with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now you can, if you put focus on the clock, for example, on iOS with VoiceOver, and you're connected to DotPad, the clock icon is actually animated. So like the hands do move round. I'm not claiming that that's a brilliant experience at this point. You know, it works. I think we're quite early, and I think the first step toward making tactile animation more viable was to increase the speed of refresh, right? Because you're always going to be limited by that kind of frame rate. You know, if you want something to animate, you know, smoothly. And actually, Marco's the guy to talk to because he used to be a professional animator in a former life. So, you know, it is something that we all need to be collaborating on and thinking about how that might work in the future. And there are some very early kind of rudimentary examples available today if you want to check those out.
Yeah, actually, I should reframe my question, because if we have description available, like I'm just wondering how the Braille display could be made interactive in the sense that not necessarily repeating the graphic, but how we would use it in a Braille display. I mean, I've had interviews with people who are using Braille displays, but just a refreshable line and access to the descriptions that way.
I think the way at the moment, you know, the most kind of robust way at the moment is probably like stop motion, you know. So like in Dot Canvas, for example, you could build a deck with a character moving across the display, and then the user can then press buttons on their display to you know, move that on at whatever speed they want, which might be a bit simplistic, but it would work, you know, reliably.
This is Abby. I just want to lift up that I know that Leona Holloway has done some interesting research on dynamic displays, and we'll include that in our summary here. We're just at time just to really give a shout out to Danielle and to Kai for hosting. And Kai, I think you may have had one last final thing to say. And we have Doreen, who's ready to share a little bit of an update about what's coming next month. So thank you all.
Yeah, thanks everyone again for being here, and I'm really excited to see where things are going to go with multi-line displays. I mean, I'll just say, you know, in terms of just the power of Braille, this would have been a lot more challenging to host and look at the questions and everything without Braille. So I've been plugging in my Braille display and using that for the session. And yeah, I think let's keep the conversation going, and I'll pass it to Doreen and Abby for any closing comments and thoughts. Thanks.
Abby asked me to say a few words on the next meeting. It will be on international cooperation and what needs to be done to facilitate that for making tactile images, tactile books. And I have 3 promising speakers. I hope they can all come. And I would like to thank you very much for this very interesting tactile talk. Thanks.
And finally, I just want to, welcome you all again to the next session. And if you have ideas for sessions that you want to hear, please let us know. This was Kai's initiative to bring this group together, and Doreen has the initiative to really kind of challenge us to think about how do we support international collaboration, cooperation. And we have several other exciting talks in the future, but we would love to hear your ideas for what you want to hear, and whether that's a topic or a panel. So thank you everybody for your time, and we look forward to meeting you again.